we are drowning. Now, I want us to picture this, this whole story, because for me, as a person who doesn't read often, I like to read, but I don't read it often. I rather just have visual things. When I read, I like to visualize the story, and so I want us to try that today. Imagine you are in a boat. Many of you who have been on boat, you're probably experts at this, but for myself, I'm not an expert. So anything, a little turbulence scares me already. But imagine this storm. They're in a storm, right? And it's to the point where the water is almost overtaking the boat. For many of us, we would be afraid. In fact, the disciples were afraid, right? And that's why, they were panicking, they were afraid. But what's interesting in this story is that the disciples that were on this boat, some of them were trained fishermen. So they should have known how to deal with the waters because that's their job. Just like how you say a basketball player, when you give them a basketball, they know what to do with the basketball. They're not always efficient, but they know what to do. You give a person a car key who has driving experience for over 30 years, you give them a car key, they know what to do. You give a teacher a lesson plan, they know what to do. You give a pastor a Bible, I hope he knows what he's doing. But usually when you are in a profession, you know what to do when the elements are something you're familiar with. But in our story here, you see that the disciples are now in panic mode. And I don't know about you, but in moments of high stress, one thing I've learned is that you should not panic. Because when you panic, you create mistakes. And when you make mistakes, you cause the whole thing to fall apart. So in moments of high stress, stay calm. These individuals, though, they were not calm. And you can tell that by the way they talked to their teacher. It says, "Teacher, do you not care if we drown? Do you not care if we die?" Usually when you're calm, you're like, "Hey, wake up. Can you help us? Hey, we're about to, something's going on. Wake up." This one's like, "No, wake up. We're going to drown. Wake up." And in fact, the way it's said, it sounds like they didn't even care who he was. They forgot he was their teacher. He's like, "Don't you care?" But Jesus is a funny guy. He was sound asleep. I don't know about you, but I know if I was in a storm, I would not be able to sleep. Especially if the boat is rocking to and fro, water splashing in your face. You're telling me you were asleep? To me, that is impossible. But Jesus was. And I assume it was because, obviously, he might have been exhausted from his whole day of teaching and healing and being with people. I know for many of us, because of COVID, our social battery has diminished a little bit. We can be excited to meet people, but eventually sometimes we get just tired and we just want to go home, close the door, and just relax. And I think Jesus got to that point of exhaustion, and so there was a possibility that Jesus was just fast asleep. But what's interesting, to me at least, is that the disciples who are trained in this, right, this water, this whole scenario, they should have known what to do. They should have been able to keep the boat afloat, get the waters out. In fact, they should have known because this part of the world, I guess, the lake that's in Galilee, was known to have storms all the time. So they knew going into it what they were getting themselves into. At least I would assume it would be. Andrew's Bible commentary states that the water was described, or the storm was described as like an earthquake on the sea. The waves of the waters and the winds were so high because of where it was. There were mountains surrounding it, and so the winds were able to generate at least 7 feet high waves. And so this was a natural occurrence. This was something that was, common. And so you would think that those who had experience going into something that they've already knew would come out okay. In fact, many of us think about that same thing in our own personal life. We think that because we've lived the life that we live, experienced the life that we experienced, attained the knowledge that we have, that we're able to tread through life scot-free. But sometimes as we walk into our journey with God, you notice that there are certain storms in our life that we cannot handle. Anyone with that? Anyone experience that? Where you walk into a storm thinking that you have everything set, only to realize that you have nothing under your control. You see, the boat that they were in, I'm sure was equipped for moments like this. They probably had, I don't know, their version of a life jacket maybe, I'm assuming. But I'm sure they had ropes that were ready to keep the boat sturdy. They had anchors that they were able to use to keep the boat from drifting away into a more dangerous part of the waters. They had the skill set to be able to do that, yet they still were struggling. And you see in all of this, Jesus is still sound asleep. But finally, once Jesus was able to wake up, once the disciples woke him up, Mark 4, verse 39 says, "And he got up, rebuked the winds, and said, 'Quiet, be still.' The winds died down, and it completely calmed." Now, this is a story, like I said, that is many of us are familiar with. Many of us know. But when I read this story, and the reason why I love sharing this story is because of one instance that we kind of sometimes, or at least I kind of sometimes glazed over. And was that the fact that Jesus was in the boat. I don't know if you were catching that, but Jesus was in the boat. Even bigger than that, Jesus instructed them to get into the boat. And through the storm, through it all, through all the mess and the worries and the doubts and the fears, the anxiety that was building up because of the storm, Jesus was where? In the boat. I don't know about you, but that to me means that no matter what storm I face, no matter what doubts I experience, whatever moments of loneliness I have, because I believe in a God that saves, He is already in my boat. He is already in your boat. But one thing that the disciples did not realize, that I want, hopefully, for us to see, is that yes, they might have been experienced. Yes, they might have been given the skills to tread through these waters. But they did something wrong. Is that instead of relying on their skills, instead of relying on their abilities, instead of relying on their experiences and their friends' knowledge, they should have just went to Jesus first. Because He was in their boat. Mind you, the relationship with the disciples was still fairly new with Jesus. You know, they were able to see a few miracles. They probably saw Jesus turn water into wine. They probably saw Jesus heal a man, talk about all of these things. So their faith in God was still kind of new. And I think Jesus knew that. Hence why this was a perfect teaching moment. Because Jesus had the ability to heal the illnesses of people. Jesus had the ability to heal the physical illnesses that people had. But in this moment, what Jesus was doing was now trying to teach them that He can heal our emotional state. He can heal the anxieties that we may feel. He can heal the worries, the doubts, the fears, the sadness, the sorrow, the tears that we may feel. Because once He is in our boat, no storm can tip us over. No trial can take us out. No worries and doubts can take us away from the love of God. We just have to remember that Jesus is in our boat. One of the transforming thoughts I had growing up in the church was that Jesus is in our boat, but it doesn't always mean that the storms will go away. I remember when I was a child, and this is because I was probably a child, I thought that once I got baptized that life was clean and clear, that I will be in perfect unity with God. And I did, and I was for a couple months. Mind you, I got baptized when I was 8, and so, like a child, I thought that everything was going good. Once I got into my teen years, around 16, 17, my curiosity kicked in, and some of my friends who are older had already left, and I was curious of what it was. And so I was on my way out as well. And it seemed that the more I got closer to God, the further I felt away from Him. You guys ever experienced that? That the more I learn about Him, the more life seems to get harder. The more I spend time with Him, it seems like the world is pulling me stronger. And it feels like I'm going in waves. For those of you who've ever swam in the ocean, they say don't get too far from the shore if you don't know how to swim, because there's a point in the water where it will suck you away. It'll push you in thinking that you are safe, but at a certain point it will pull you away further than where you started. And so there is a danger if you are not well adversed in what is going on. It's not like a swimming pool. It's not like a wave pool. The waters, especially waters uncharted, are dangerous. And you can take that into life. Life path journeys that are uncharted can be dangerous. But when we focus ourselves into Christ, there is this sense of peace. But just because Christ is in your boat doesn't mean that you are free from all harm and danger. There are still dangers. John 15, verse 18 and 19 says, if the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to this world. I want to repeat that again. As people who believe in God, we do not belong to this world. We are in it because this is where we were born, this is where we live, but we do not belong to this world. The verse then continues and says, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. And that is why the closer we get to God, the more it feels like we're being pulled away, because the world is trying its best. And sometimes we fall, we fail, we wander away from God. But when Christ is in the center, there is peace in your storm. Just because God is in your boat doesn't mean the storm will go away. What it does mean, though, is that you still receive peace. The reason why the title of my sermon is called The Eye of the Storm is because when you think of a cyclone, surprisingly enough, the center is where there is most calm, where there is most peace. Everything else around you might be in destruction, and it might be, falling apart, and you might get residues of that. You might get wet from the water. You might get, rubble on you. But in the center, there is peace. Isaiah 26 verse 3 says, you will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. When we put our trust in God, we can be still. We can have faith. We can be anchored in our storm, knowing that everything around us is falling apart, but Jesus at the center of it all will keep us afloat. John 1 verse 12 says, yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he has given them the right to become children of God. For those of you who are parents, don't you want to do good things for your children? Don't you want to show them love and protect them from any dangers that they might occur? I know when I was growing up, my dad would tell me stories about his childhood as a teenager, or at least he tried to, so that I would be able to avoid certain things to navigate through my life. God, who knows all things, does the same with us. All we have to do is trust. No matter what storm you are facing, no matter what doubts, no matter what fears, anxieties, depression, worries, I'm here to tell you that there is a way out. And that is in Christ. I want to leave you with one of my favorite stories. It's a story about a contest. A king, I think I've shared this before, but I love sharing this story because this story is my favorite. A king was doing a contest about, in his kingdom, about who can make an art piece that represented peace. And he asked all of the artists in the city to make this art piece. Finally, he went through all of them, eliminating some of them, and he landed on the last two. The first one that he saw was this piece. Well, not this exactly, but this piece where there was trees, mountains, waterfall, this serenity, this peace. But surprisingly enough, the king chose this as the second best. He chose something totally different as the number one winner. And it was this photo. A photo of raging waters, thunderstorms, dark clouds, and just chaos. And people were questioning why was that the winning photo. It was because in the small detail, where no one sees, there was a bird who was at peace. In the center of it all, it was peace. Friends, I want us to recognize that all of us will go through storms. In fact, some of us are in a storm now. Some of us are treading dangerous waters. But we need to understand that there is peace at the center when Christ is in our boat. So I'm going to leave you with this last text. Surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age. God is with you. God is with you. He is with you in your happiness. He is with you in your victory. He is with you when things are going great. But He is also with you when things are falling apart. He is also with you when you feel like you are drowning. He is also with you when everything is going against you. All we need to do is focus on Him. Focus on Him. Brothers and sisters, we have this hope that burns within our hearts. Hope in the coming of who? The Lord. I want us this week, this month, this year to remember that hope as we enter our storm, that Jesus is our hope. This is my prayer.